You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Could body trust be the secret to finding balance and freedom? Find out more in today's episode. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we dive into the concept of body trust and how it can transform the way we approach fitness, health, and self-care. Our guest challenges the idea that health is about shrinking ourselves and instead encourages us to embrace body trust, joyful movement, and food freedom. Courtney McCarthy is the CEO and founder of Loyobo, a community for women who are sick of trying to be smaller. This isn't about weight loss. This is about learning how to love your body and feel strong so you can take up more space in your life. Radical body acceptance, joyful movement, and food freedom. Courtney's mission as an ACE certified fitness instructor, body image and mindful eating coach is to show women how to write their own rules when it comes to fitness and health. She will be your biggest hype girl along the way. Courtney is always down for a dance party. When she's not working, she loves going for long walks with her puppy Archie and cuddling with her cat Munchkin. Let's meet Courtney McCarthy. Hi, Courtney. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because the concept of body trust is part of what we'll be discussing today. And honestly, I don't think we've ever done an episode just about that. I'm very curious to dive in. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I think this is one of these topics that is so important to discuss because pretty much everyone I know, and I imagine a lot of listeners run into this issue of body trust at one point in their lives. So I very much look forward to discussing that with you and getting your perspectives on that. And for starters, would you like to share a little bit about your own journey, maybe how that ties into what you do today, and let our listeners know what it is that you do today?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like, especially in the context of body trust, I am someone like most women who struggled with my body from a very young age, of feeling that immense pressure to look a certain way, to be a certain weight, and really thought it came down to dominating my body, of trying to control it very tightly, having that willpower, having that determination, and having this kind of external vision of success, of what success looked like. And that really tied also into my mental health. I struggled from a very young age with depression and generalized anxiety, which came later as a diagnosis as premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so that also led to the combination of those two things, the struggling with body dysmorphia and body issues and eating disorder issues, combined with all the mental health struggles. It really meant that I realized as an adult, I didn't know how to trust myself, both from a body perspective and also just from my own feelings, my own intuition, my own ability to know who I am and what I want. I didn't know how to do that. My whole life had been set up around the idea of being attractive to others, of looking a certain way, of being perceived a certain way, of being very aware of other people's judgments and other people's opinions. So I had to really go on this journey to learn what it meant to trust. And especially as a fitness instructor, to learn what it meant to trust my body and to how to be able to teach my clients how to do the same thing. And what it led to, learning how to trust my body has allowed me to heal a lot of things that I thought were just issues that were inherently wrong with me. So healing from IBS symptoms, healing from disordered eating, being able to live basically stress-free when it comes to food, being able to listen to my body, listen to what it wants, what it needs, when it's hungry, when it's full, and having a new sort of confidence in who I am. And as I said, what I want, how I see the world, how I define success, and writing my own rules when it comes to health and fitness is kind of the end result of discovering what trust and body trust looks like in my life. So that's like the Coles Notes version of the journey. And so what I do now as both an anti-diet fitness instructor and a body image coach is I work with women who are kind of at the same point of their lives that I was, of really kind of, they're sick of wanting to make themselves smaller. They're sick of dieting. They're frustrated, and they've kind of come to that same epiphany of wanting something more for themselves, wanting to connect with themselves in a deeper way. And so I teach them how both to heal their relationship with movement and also how to heal their relationship with their body, which means cultivating that sense of trust.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that you're an anti-diet fitness instructor. This is amazing. And I have to say that as you are speaking and explaining about the intuition, the body trust, the rebuilding the relationship with movement, I feel like that is a huge piece that is definitely missing when we may have our first encounter, for example, with disordered eating, and we might see our doctor or GP. And body trust is usually not one of the things that comes up in the conversation. Actually, it never came up in conversations that I had with my doctor. And because I was told to just exercise, eat right, it's something that you'll grow out of, those were things that didn't help. And I feel you offering a path to actually heal that relationship, rebuild that trust in ourselves, it's a huge, crucial piece that is never actually addressed. So when you work with clients, and I'm imagining also for yourself, when they come to you, is this usually sort of this piece of their lives where they have been through the system, or they may have not found that support, and then they come to this completely different perspective on what that means to trust your body and what that means to have that healthy relationship? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. And I would say that most of them don't come to me knowing that they haven't had that epiphany yet. That's something that they just know that they're frustrated. They just know that basically what they've spent decades trying doesn't work. They have done the dieting, they've done the fad fitness trends, they've done, XYZ, they've spent money, they've wasted money, and they've kind of felt stuck. And they're realizing, okay, this doesn't work. But there's that question mark of like, okay, well, what does work? What is the alternative? And that's where they kind of come in with an open mind. Of one of the first questions I ask whenever someone is, interested in working with me is, are you open to an approach that doesn't focus on weight loss? Because for most of us, that's kind of only been the definition of success that we've been working under. And that goes from the medical system, the beauty system, the fitness industry, the health industry. All of these really center around a singular concept. And based on my experience, for the vast majority of women, it doesn't work. And it's kind of like trying to shove ourselves round peg into a square hole. And we've spent our whole lives blaming ourselves rather than just looking for a different hole and looking for something that does work and that does fit. And I think it's such a shame that I think it's not, when it comes to health and seeking medical support, absolutely, you're so right in that this is not something that for the vast majority of doctors ever discuss something like body trust. I think what's even more harmful is that even with our first encounters with food, with our first encounters with movement, with our first encounters of really making decisions, we as women really aren't taught what it means to trust ourselves, what it means to really explore using our own voice And that's what makes me so passionate about what I do, is because I think it's such a disservice that the world doesn't get to hear from such a huge part of our population. And I want women to see the power that they have when they're able to trust themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost feel like this is something we should be teaching even in schools, because
Yes.
these are huge issues already as we're growing up. I mean, I had already my first encounters as a young teenager. So I'm feeling like these aren't just adult issues, but we really are talking, and maybe not even just female issues
Mm.
that we are encountering from quite a young age. And we have to shoulder this somehow and deal with this somehow. And it does end up affecting our mental health, our physical health, sort of everything across the board. Because as you said, I used to look for the fault at myself. I used to ask myself, what is going on? Why am I not looking like this magazine cover? Why am I not doing exercises the way that this very fit person from the 80s with the little,
Yep.
they had those little leg warmers and everything. Why am I
Yep.
not looking like that? So yeah, it's certainly something that I feel should be a much bigger part in a conversation around not just physical health, but also mental health. And I'm wondering, for yourself, when you had that realization that something needed to change, and also when you work with your clients, how do you go about starting to rebuild body trust? How do you start that off? Some people may not have had very traumatizing encounters, but some people may have actually had very traumatizing encounters around that. So, where do you start off rebuilding that kind of trust?
What a great question. The first step I always say is awareness. And for many of us, we haven't been taught how to listen for that voice. We aren't comfortable with being still and turning our awareness inwards to find answers. We're often seeking those external solutions. Like as you said, there's something wrong with me. I need something else to fix me. I need something else to make it better. So we're looking for people to tell us what to do and to show us the way. So what I first do is practice with them how to use skills like meditation and journaling and just mindfulness to notice their thoughts. And once we notice the thoughts, once we start to become aware of what's going on inside of our bodies, what's going on inside of our heads, then we can start to do the work of, okay, can we challenge that? Is that true? Is what I'm thinking true? If it isn't true, or whether it is or it isn't, who taught that to me? Is this mine? Is this mine to carry? Does this reflect my values, my outlook on the world, how I feel? Is it what's best for me? But we can't do any of that until we have that awareness. So a big part of it is learning how to be still, learning how to listen and tune inwards is the best first step.
Yeah, and that can be scary, as we
Yes.
kind of
But it's
touched
also
on.
those distress tolerance skills
Yeah.
of that's where a big part of where the movement comes in is learning different ways to feel the feelings, learning different ways to process the emotions that allow you to move through it rather than getting stuck or rather than just simply trying to push it down.
I feel like movement can be another one of those pieces that sometimes I used to use movement as punishment. So I have to exercise more to look a certain way. And later on, when I had an accident and I was diagnosed with the complex regional pain syndrome, I actually became afraid of movement. And that became another piece of, I gained a lot of weight because I couldn't move, and I punished myself for that in other ways. So, is there a way to bring movement back into our lives in a much more healing capacity and in a much more healthy relationship than maybe what we have with movement when we are trying to fit ourselves in these very unrealistic standards that society gives us?
Yeah. And I love how you phrased it because I think that most often it is punishment. Or the other word is control, that we're using movement and fitness and exercise as a way to control our bodies or override them, or as you said, outright punish them for either what we ate or didn't eat or did or didn't do. And that's really what the fitness industry has for many years promoted as what it means to be successful. And so the pathway to healing is really giving yourself permission to throw a lot of the rules that you've been taught or the rules that you have around movement out the window. And so part of the process is, first of all, discovering what those rules are. A lot of us don't realize just how many rules that we have around what exercise is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be this amount of time and you're supposed to get this amount of sweaty, or you're supposed to burn this amount of calories. Or even I've had clients that say it doesn't count if I'm not wearing the right thing, or if I'm not feeling the right way. There's so many things that we do to kind of box ourselves in that it's only movement that's correct or successful or done right if it looks this way. And of course, none of us want to do things that aren't what we see as good or valuable. So this often creates this really all or nothing thinking where we don't exercise unless it meets this very strict criteria. And then we get that loop, right? Of we feel badly, so we're shaming ourselves, and the shame is what then we try to use to motivate ourselves to move, but the movement doesn't look the way that we feel like it should. And then the cycle continues. So a big part of that is discovering the rules that you have, giving yourself permission to question them, to throw a lot of them out the window, and then really starting to write new rules. I use the word hell yes a lot. Rules that are like a hell yes for you of that make movement a lot more accessible, that make movement a lot easier and more stress-free, and that allows you the flexibility to adapt the movement to where you are in your life, to what's happening in your life, to what's happening in your body. So an example of this is a lot of work that I do with my clients is around 5-minute movement. And many of them come in thinking, oh my God, absolutely not. Like 5 minutes, I can't do anything in 5 minutes. It's not enough. And yet it's a hell yes. Most people, even on your worst day, can you say, can I do 5 minutes of breathing? Can I do 5 minutes of stretching? For most of us, that's like, yeah, I can convince myself to do that. And then we build this positive feedback loop where they say yes to the 5 minutes. They do something in 5 minutes that feels really good. They feel successful. They feel motivated. They feel like they took care of their bodies, and that makes them want to do it again. And we do that for all kinds of rules, whether it's the duration of time, so like the 5 minutes, whether it's the type of movement. I have a lot of women who come in again, thinking that the only valuable movement is the stuff that makes you sweaty or makes you hurt or makes you sore the next day. And so opening up to different kinds of movement that allow us that flexibility, as I said, for, we're women, we have cycles where our bodies don't feel up to the challenge necessarily of doing something really intense or really high activity. So opening up different kinds of modalities and letting them see the beauty of movement being something that's so expansive and something that is, I often use the analogy marathon, not a sprint, that we're not trying to get it right every single day. We're not trying to meet this external goal and get to this end finish line. We're actually just trying to think of, okay, day by day, can you make choices based on what feels best for your body? And sometimes that means rest, and sometimes that's going to mean movement, but really giving themselves permission to start to have those conversations.
Yeah. And in turn, that will build more body trust, I think, as you're listening to yourself and your body telling you what it is that it needs and wants. So
it's amazing how we all know how to build trust with other people and the basic concepts of how to build trust in a relationship. And yet we don't often apply that to ourselves. We're willing to bail on promises that we make to ourselves. We don't do the things that we say that we're going to do. We don't show up for ourselves when we need it the most. And then we wonder why we have such a hard time trusting ourselves, because we haven't put that work in and taken that action that's really necessary.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I hope our listeners are taking some of these nuggets for themselves, because we don't have to treat ourselves any differently or put ourselves on the back burner all the time. we are allowed and we deserve, with every fiber of our being, that we take care of ourselves as well and that we look after ourselves. So this is a big thing, building that body trust and going from there and actually feeling a bit of a sense of accomplishment, even if you've taken just 5 minutes to do something for yourself that's made you feel good in some way, be that a movement or a breathing technique or something. So yeah, I feel like that's really valuable piece of advice that you're giving there. So
Thank you.
definitely. Now, I am wondering, because in my own head, I'm kind of thinking when I was struggling with eating, when I was struggling with movement, it was always in my head that the only way forward was weight loss. I had to lose weight. I had to look a certain way. So when clients come to work with you, and you kind of turn that on its head, how do you keep them motivated and actually help them change that perspective if they're coming with an expectation that there's only one way to go forward? How do you help them change that in their mind, maybe how they think about that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is a layered process. I do like to arm myself with a lot of the science because a lot of the women, are very smart and educated. And so when you're able to show them the science and remind them of things, that like 95% of diets don't work, that diets don't pass the process that the FDA uses to approve any other kind of pharmaceutical or medical intervention, that it doesn't pass those basic tests. And many of them have that lived experience too, right? Where we can point to the fact that if dieting worked, it would have worked already because many of us have decades of experience with it. We often spend up to 17 weeks of the year on some kind of diet if you're in diet culture. So part of it is educating on the science of not just why diets don't work and why the pursuit of weight loss doesn't work, but also really getting them to understand how our bodies work. So that's a little bit of the exercise physiology, a little bit of psychology, to just really, I think that knowledge is power. And the more that we understand how our bodies and our minds work, the more easy it is to accept them. And rather than trying to, again, control them or fight against them or resist kind of what we're feeling, we can understand it more and then choose differently. So that's a big part of it is educating, talking about the science, getting to a point where we can understand what's happening inside of our bodies. And then it's about setting other kinds of goals. So something that I talk a lot about is functional or ability-based goals. So this is asking them and figuring out, what do you want to be able to do in your life that maybe you've done before but can't do now or have never done. So for some women, that's getting up and down off the floor because they want to be able to play with their grandkids. For others, it's being able to climb the stairs up in their apartment building and not get out of breath. For others, it's getting rid of chronic pain or finding movement that really makes their life feel fun, makes them feel connected, gives them social time. So whatever it is, we look for those functional ability and joy-based goals. And when we find those goals and we combine it with this new definition of movement and this new set of rules for movement, that really creates movement that they enjoy, that is intentional, that doesn't feel like punishment, but really feels very hedonistic, is time in their life that feels full of pleasure, then that really helps with the motivation and for them to switch their mindset. And what I love seeing is the long-term success. As I have a lot of members who, before working with me, said they'd never stuck with anything, especially when it came to movement, that they had always been kind of the yo-yo exerciser. We hear about yo-yo dieting, but we all know the yo-yo exerciser, right? Where you go, okay, this week I'm going hard, and maybe that lasts a few weeks or a few months, but then it dies down. Versus now I have had members for years and years, and it's the first time that they've ever been able to stick with something. And it's because it's really coming from that place of love and kindness and a desire to take care of their body rather than shame it. So that's kind of the process that we use to shift away from weight loss.
I like that a lot. And you did mention before that it's a layered process. And I feel like we really see that in when you're explaining that, because we might look at this as a very physical thing. So, okay, we want to lose weight because we need to fit a certain standard. But really, there's a mental component, there's the emotional component, then there's also the physical piece that fits to all of that. So, it's a real huge perspective shift from looking at it in this one dimension of what we think we want to achieve to really opening up to all these different layers that work together to make this a success, not just on a physical basis, but really for our entire lives and then how we feel and how we show up in life. It feels really like this will have an impact on so many things, not just physical health. So,
Yeah.
sounds really wonderful. And tell us a little bit about your company as well, because it has such an interesting name. And I asked you before the show what it stands for. So tell our listeners a little bit about that as well.
Yes, I definitely will. But first, I wanted to go back to something that you said, and I wanted to just share that one of the reasons too that I'm so passionate about what I do is that I've been there where I've done the weight loss. I've gotten into the body that I thought was everything that I wanted. And I got there and realized, it didn't heal the things that I thought it was going to heal. I wasn't instantaneously confident. I didn't feel great in my body. It didn't stop my obsession with weight loss, even when I really had no more weight to lose. So that lived experience really helps me to be able to show up and be a good coach, because I can say, listen, I've been there, I've done this. I know that it's not the answer. So let me tell you what did help me get to feel the way that I wanted to feel. And then to answer your question, Loyobo. So Loyobo stands for Love Your Body. And it is a community of women who are all doing this kind of work together, who are on the same journey of trying to break out of diet culture and write their own rules when it comes to their life, when it comes to their body, when it comes to health and fitness. So there is the fitness component where we have live classes and we have on-demand videos, but there's also a lot of this other work that's happening. So a lot of the mindset work, a lot of the coaching, and a lot of the connection between one another as well, because they learn and get so much positive connection and experience from just talking to one another and hearing that. It's one thing to hear from me that they're not alone, but to hear from other women who are also in the trenches with them and to have their experience reflected back to them is really powerful as well. So we have lots of social events and workshops and challenges that just encourage people and invite them to connect and do self-exploration and learn some of these tools and skills that we've been talking about.
That sounds amazing. And thank you for going back also to your lived experience, because that is a huge component. I think that helps others tune into what you are actually offering them and see that maybe all these external things aren't actually going to bring any of that healing. We have to change that perspective. And you've lived that. So that makes a huge difference in how you can actually provide the support in the community. And did you find that once you connect with the community, that makes a big difference? I feel like sometimes we're on this lone wolf path and we're trying to diet and do this and that all by ourselves. So,
Yeah.
how does that change when we actually connect with a community that we can be part of in that sense?
Yeah, great question. The analogy I often use is that shame lives in darkness, and shame really wants you to feel alone and to feel that everything that you're going through or everything that you're thinking or struggling with is abnormal and almost that you're unique in this awful, terrible way. And that's the most powerful thing that I think community does is it gives you a space where you can explore your shame, you can shine a light on it and recognize that whatever you're going through, whatever you think is that thing that's broken about you or abnormal or that's unique just to you is not something that is unique, that so many other women have gone through it, that so many women are experiencing it or struggling with it. And I love it because it is working with our psychology, is that there's a lot of science that shows that when you do something in a group, when you have that group fitness component, that's a big part of motivation. Is it's not just showing up to do the movement itself, but it's also because you're going to see, Joanne or Sarah or Melissa or whoever's going to be in class with you. And I love seeing, we have a WhatsApp group with some retreat participants that I ran recently, and they love sending messages like, I've signed up for this class. Who am I going to see there? And it all happens without me, which I love. And I love seeing those friendships develop. And I love knowing that they're able to reach out in the midst of the muck, in the middle of those messy moments when you're struggling. They have this outlet where friends and family may not fully understand, or they may be the source of the shame or the negative feelings or what's going on. So they have this really safe community that they can go to where they know they're going to be held and get support, not just from the expert of me or my team members, but also from each other.
Yeah, and that becomes part of the healing in a sense, to be able to share that with others and with yourself who's also lived that. So yeah, that's a huge component, I feel, of healing, and not just, moving forward with whatever goals we eventually decide what we want to be motivated for, but also with that deep inner healing that happens at that same time. So yeah, that sounds very beautiful. And thank you for offering this amazing space, and safe and welcoming, and sounds like a very supportive space for individuals on this journey. And if our listeners are curious now and they want to connect with you, or they want to work with you, what kind of things do you offer? Is this a strictly in-person thing, or do you offer online things as well? How can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, we are a fully online community. So the place that you can find me the most, I hang out on Instagram quite a lot. So you can find me there at Loyobofit. That's LOYOBOFIT. But you can also reach out. I love to connect and I love to have conversations, and I'm never too busy. And I promise you, you are never a burden or imposing when you reach out for support. So feel free to shoot me an email or a DM on Instagram. And I also would love to offer your listeners access. I have a free 5-day confidence course that really gets at this body trust and starts to help with that first step of building awareness and starting to write a new story for yourself. So they can access that at loyobofit.com/free5.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Courtney's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her wonderful online community. If you're finding yourself on this journey and frankly, you're maybe sick and tired of doing this by yourself because it's not working, then say hello to Courtney, hit her up online, send her a message, and see if you like to connect with her community. It sounds like such a wonderful space to be part of and to begin your own healing journey. And if you do connect with Courtney, let me know. You can also send me a message on Instagram. I usually reply when I know where to find it on Instagram. That's usually the bigger problem. So I will send you a message back and let me know how that was working with Courtney and joining the community. I feel like there's a lot of magic that happens when our guests connect with our listeners. So I'm always curious to hear those experiences and those stories. And of course, take a look at the show notes for the freebie as well. We'll make sure we link up with that. And Courtney, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you today. I feel like we all got such great insights from you sharing your wisdom and your lived journey. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing that with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having this platform. And as I said, having conversations like this is such an important piece. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I wish you all the best. And hopefully we'll connect a lot of listeners to your platform and we all start this healing journey together. Thank you so much, Courtney, and take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.